Hello and welcome to that CMS Guy podcast. We're going to be speaking to David Protheroe, who has got a TikTok page called New Ashton True Member. He's gone through an extraordinary journey in terms of contact with his children. We'll find out for sure. And he's got a very in-depth knowledge about the family courts and his journey. So we're going to explore that today.
Flying through the moon, like you play among the stars. Let me see what if I can't, you could all apart. In other words, please be true. In other words, I love you.
Hey, well, honey, how are you?
How you doing?
I'm fine, thanks. Nice last. I'd shake hands with you, but
Just
but I
shake
can't.
hands. Shake hands.
Yeah, there's just a hand. How do you do?
I'm very well. Welcome to that CMS Guy podcast. Your
Thank
name
you.
is David. How do you
I am
pronounce your surname, David?
Protheroe Bainan.
And you've got a TikTok channel. What's the name of your channel?
It's called New Ashton Crew.
Oh, we lost you.
I'm a security guard at a job centre, and we just we're working in Ashton. At that time there was one job centre, and then they changed it to two.
David, could I ask you to sit somewhere where your internet is the strongest and stay in one place, because otherwise it becomes very unstable and then it's hard to get a good podcast.
So anyway, I'm right. Okay, I'll do my best. Can you hear me now? I can't, you're kind of, your image is frozen.
Yeah, I can hear you. I can hear you, but your image is it's frozen. Is it? Have you got somewhere in your home where you've got relatively good internet, stable internet?
I'm supposed to be, I'm about uh, away from my. Am I frozen?
Yeah, you've been frozen for the last about a minute, I suppose. I haven't really heard much of what you said. So if you could just go somewhere where you like, maybe I don't know, somewhere close to your router where you can have a good connection to your internet, and then stay there.
The roof is right there. The roof
Yeah,
is right there.
okay, stay really nice and close to that, and that will be so.
Okay.
Let's start again. So hello, David. Welcome to that CMS Guy podcast. How do you pronounce your surname?
You pronounce it Protheroe Bainan, but because it's a long name.
Protheroe Bainan.
Yeah, Bainan. But because it's a long name, I go with it's just David, and you
That
shouldn't see me trying to fit all that.
David works for me. So, David, you've got a channel on TikTok, and it's done really well. But what's the name of your channel?
Thank you. New Ashton Crew Member.
What about the other one then? Because the one I'm referring to is the is it called the Millwall and Stepdad? That's because you got a channel called Millwall and Stepdad. Is that
Yeah,
right?
that's my. I think that there's that, and then there's the other bit is New Ashton Crew Member. That's like my username, and because I've got to be careful about identifying my children, I just I named it after them without naming it after them, if you know what I mean.
I understand. So is it okay for us to say Millwall online?
I think it's better to go with New Ashton crew member because it's because that's like the username. And I had originally I had a channel called Ashton crew member, and because of this thing with this fresh allegation that's against me, the police took my phone and they still got it, and so I had to start again with a very old and dying Apple 6, I think it was, and I relaunched the channel I'm on now, which is the one you call Millwall and Stepdad, and that's it's and to be fair, I think what I've done now has gone from strength to strength because they're okay in there. I try to make it as factual and provable as humanly possible. So I don't speculate. I just say, right, this is what so and so has said. This is what it says in that report, and this is how you use your intelligence to work out, does this make sense?
I think that you are a very intelligent individual. I've seen a number of your videos, and what strikes me the most is that you are a researcher. You're an individual who is really drilled down deep into the family court system, the laws, and but what I'd like to do, David, is could you just describe what's been are you able to discuss what's happened?
Yeah, I can.
So I think the audience would be really interested in finding out what's happened to you, and then what you've been doing since to combat it as a non-resident parent. I know you actually don't really deal with the CMS, do you?
No, just before what I might call round 2 kicked off, which is the fresh round of allegations, my ex was saying to me, in fact, the night she assaulted me, she said if I don't start paying more, she's going to bring in the CMS. And then she picked another quarrel with me, kicked the legs from under me, and you can imagine how that went. And so I'm fighting the second round of allegations, which has got my eldest daughter saying, and all I can say is that the police are supposed to be reaching a decision by the 18th of October.
So let's start from the beginning. So tell us about your relationship. What was it like? What was going on in your relationship? How did it end?
I think,
when did it end?
Well, from about lockdown, I think, was when the rot started really. My wife had been working at a local bakery, and supporting us while I was doing a business management degree, which she was actually in favor of me doing. But I said, if I do this, it's going to be a lot of hard work, and money's going to be tight, and it's going to be years before we see any benefit out of it. So I was doing well with that, but it was, doing any kind of a degree is a lot of hard work, and I was doing well at it. But she said, why don't I go off and be a manager at a supermarket? I said, I'm not interested in supermarkets. I'm interested in aviation. I want to do something in that. And so anyway, I was working hard at it. And then COVID hit and threw everything into the air. I had to go on universal credit. And actually that turned out better for us because while I was on universal credit, well, I still am, I can get that. I got my SIA badge, became a security guard, and I got a job, as I say, working for a job centre.
Yeah.
I've been doing that since 2020. And I actually enjoy it. And financially, we were actually doing very well. But because I didn't have a manager's job title, it was demeaning. And so the rot was setting in.
Demeaning to you, or demeaning to your
demeaning to her, because even though financially we had a good standard of household income, wasn't managed. But I was a security guard, not a brain surgeon.
I lost you there for a second, David. Could you start that from again? So, he wanted you to have a title.
Yeah, she wanted me to have a fancy job title, like a manager or a supervisor or a director or a barrister or a surgeon, that kind of a job title. But I said, I'm happy doing what I do, and I've got a manager's salary without the stress of being a manager. Why bother?
Mm.
and it wasn't good enough for her. She was verbally very unkind to me. That's the best way I can describe it on here.
Yeah, I think that
Um,
she was. So what was she derogatory of you?
very derogatory. Well, for example, the fact that I don't understand spreadsheets, or I like airplanes, I like books.
Mm.
I prefer a crossword puzzle or a word puzzle or a wordle to playing football. I'm not sporty. I'm not technically minded. We had to do a project for my daughter at school last year where we had to rebuild a model of Canterbury Cathedral. And she said, why can't you just do it in a week? And when I made the point to her, Canterbury Cathedral took 1,000 years to build. She said, oh, well, you can't do it because you never finished college.
Well, I think it's a reasonable expectation to build that within a week, don't you?
Yeah, but it was it was
I'm,
fiddly. And
I'm joking.
yeah, I know, I agree. But in her case, it was everything I was doing, or she didn't understand or didn't agree with. Oh, because you never finished university, and the implication is that I'm stupid.
So
Um,
can you just explain? What's her cultural background? Is she English?
she's Congolese. She's from the northeast of the northeast of the Congo, about 200 miles from the border with Uganda, Rwanda, sort of that part of Africa.
Yeah.
And at the time I was very much in love with her. I thought she was a good woman. We've got 3 beautiful children whom I love more than I will ever love anything in the world. And then beginning of last year, she said, well, we're paying too much for rent. I want to get a council house. And I said, well, that's a long process, and it takes as long as it takes. So she said, let's register ourselves as homeless. I said, you cannot do that. First of all, it's not honest. We're not homeless. And second of all, you do that, we could end up, if we declare ourselves homeless, you could end up in a refuge or a shelter, and they're not nice places. And they're certainly not places you would choose to take a child. But her approach to that was, bearing in mind she has to renew a visa last December. She went to the council, alleged domestic abuse. Social services went through a Section 47, and the next thing I knew, towards the end of August last year.
How did you get there? How did you get from moving house to her making an allegation?
Well, here's the thing. She knew that her last December, her visa, her leave to remain visa, was due for renewal.
Oh, okay. So how long was that? 3 years, something like that?
She has to renew it every 2.5 years,
2.5
and
years.
It's very expensive. But she decided that because she wanted a council house, her visa renewed on the cheap, and benefits in her own right, which as a Congolese national she would not normally get. Once she makes an allegation of domestic abuse, she gets right round that. She's like Hitler going around the Maginot Line. She gets right round that, and she gets the same entitlement benefits as you or I would have, having been born in the UK.
Oh, right.
Yeah. And so end of August last year, I came home from work. She had gone. I found a mobile number from a social worker on the coffee table in her handwriting. I phoned it. They said there's been allegations made against you. I said, what allegations? They said, we can't tell you that. I went to see them.
So these
were
anonymous. So you knew that those allegations were coming from her, or what were they anonymous?
Yes. She said, the allegations have been made against you. We can't tell you what they are. And then beginning of September last year, I was served with a non-mol.
Right.
The day after.
Can you explain to people what a non-molestation order is?
A non-molestation order is it's when somebody makes usually a woman makes an allegation of domestic abuse. They go to family court, apply for this non-molestation order so that they can get away, or you have to go out. It's a protective device in case the allegations are true, so that it's like bail conditions where you can't contact the person or be directly or via the third party, so there can be no witness intimidation.
So that am I correct in saying that would limit your ability to have access to your children as well?
It would sever it completely, right. Because it means that because the allegations included things like threatening behaviors, that I was one of the allegations she made as an example of domestic abuse was that we didn't have a bedroom life,
Okay.
which is bizarre. But that she said I kept her short of money. I didn't let her socialize with her friends. I didn't. There's all these things she said I didn't do that sounded really horrific, but everything on everything she alleged was provably untrue.
Mm.
So
As you're talking, I'm thinking, is some of this stuff like cultural? Is there like a cultural expectation that she would advance in a particular way, have a particular title and status within society? Is that at all?
I think to a certain extent that there was that, but then the flip side of the coin was, even though she had plenty of money, enough money for us to live comfortably on, when there's money set aside for specific tasks like paying something off, she would spend on something silly like a coffee table. She said I wouldn't let her socialize with her friends, but then she insisted on driving a car on her own or with the children on a provisional license, and she got stopped by the police for that. So there's a difference between stopping somebody socializing and stopping somebody from driving a car without a license.
I'm getting a sense that maybe that behavior to drive a car without a full license, that's a level of entitlement, isn't it?
Yes, it is. And she felt that if I tried to stop her, I was wishing her bad luck on her. I said, Fatih, you've got to understand. One of the things you've got to understand, Fatih, is that, with all due respect, a black person in this country driving a nice car is more likely to attract attention of the police, and then pull you over to say, "Where'd you get the car?" or words to that effect. I'm sorry to have to say this, but it's more likely.
And if you a lot of people's experience, doesn't it?
Yes, it happened with that Bianca Williams, that the athlete. It happened with her, and so there are numerous examples of that happening. And so I just said, Fatu, with all due respect, you've got to be aware of this. So if you're driving around without a license, it's not a good thing. And it's quite a serious offence, and that could hinder your ability to get your visa renewed. So that's the sort of thing I was saying. I wasn't saying don't socialize. She did plenty of socializing, but she did say that this was me stopping her socializing.
So how did you meet David? How did you get together with this person?
We met about 13 years ago on a station platform in Cumbria, and it just went from there. At the time, we were both in other relationships, and those relationships were going south. We got together. By the Christmas of 2009, we knew that my eldest daughter was on the way. And we stayed together. We finally got permission to marry in 2015. By that time, we had my younger daughter.
Permission? What do you mean permission?
Because we're divorcees and she's Congolese, we had to apply to the Home Office for permission to marry.
Oh, right.
And then 9 months after,
sort of wedding, like just for a visa, exactly.
Well, we genuinely wanted to get married. We wanted to be together. We had by that time we had 2 daughters. 9 months after the wedding, my son was born, and so I had
you guys were being fruitful. That's amazing.
Yes, we were, and so we've got 3 children whom I love very, very much.
Yeah. And are you okay to say how old your children are?
My first daughter, the one I call on the videos, I refer to her as SGF, because I can't refer to her publicly. SGF
that's perfectly fine, mate. That's perfectly fine.
Yeah, SGF is 13. She turned 13 in July.
Yeah.
My darling little Mills bomb, she just turned 10 a couple of weeks ago. You may have seen the video.
Yeah, that's a beautiful day. Oh, yeah, I saw you. I'm going to put on this
a
clip of you sending the balloons.
The balloons, yeah. And then
my son use that footage on this video.
Yeah. I'm actually very proud of it, because I can't be with my children, but with the help of friends, we've created an international Mills Bomb Day that's been celebrated across the UK, Finland, America, and it's
that's like amazing. So how about talking about that? Tell us all about that. And is there footage of other people celebrating it as well?
Well, you can when you watch the video, you can hear my friend singing "Happy Birthday" to her,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
in my hand, my mother was on the phone, and she was singing along "Happy Birthday," and there's a guy in America called Chuck. He's got the "Why Daddy Never Cries" podcast.
Yeah, I've been on it myself. Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah, he's
and
lovely. I'm just gonna shout out to Chuck right now. That
yeah,
man's voice is absolute silk. It's the
yeah,
most beautiful voice I've ever heard.
yes,
Chuck,
yes,
We love you.
yes. I know, and there's a guy that when he starts his podcast, there's a guy in there who sounds like the actor that played Danny LaRusso's cousin in Cobra Kai.
Yeah,
The
yeah,
one, Vinny, I think his name was, or Louis, the one who,
yeah,
the cousin in the car shop.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
He sounds like that guy.
He's got a fantastic voice, isn't he? Beautiful
He's a
voice.
nice guy.
Yeah, and he's also been through
Yes.
a lot of this stuff himself. So, if there's any fathers out there, and you've got a story where you've gone through some difficulties, go to Daddy's Why Daddies Do Not Cry, and that's Chuck. What's his surname? I can't remember his surname.
Kelleher.
Callagher.
Kelleher.
Yeah, Chuck Callagher.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the smoothest guy on radio.
Yeah, he is. And he lives in Sandy Hook, I believe.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, yeah,
And his ex is Canadian. So I think those additional complications because of that.
yeah.
So, under American law. But he did a little message on his podcast that morning to say "Happy birthday, Mills Bomb, your daddy loves you."
Oh,
And
wonderful.
so we, so it's not a it's I can't send the children messages, but it's like I can't give my daughter I can't give her a present in the conventional way, but we've created a day in her honor, and
Mm.
it's sort of, yes, it's her birthday, but it's also a way of like our remembrance Sunday for all the fathers who can't be with their children on Christmas, on birthday, on Hanukkah, on Eid, on whatever else. And it's ironically, it's the sort of thing that because we're male, no matter which side of the political fence you are, no matter what sports team you represent, it can affect all of us.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
And I'm not running down the sporting rivalry. The rivalry between Manchester and Liverpool. It's it makes life worth living. But ironically, whether you support Liverpool or City or Everton or United, because we're men, we can all end up in the same cell.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, in terms of like marriage and laws that protect men, do you know what laws do protect men in this country, David?
From what I can see, the law exists to protect us. If you read through the if you read through the legislation, the CPS, Greater Manchester Police's commitment to protecting victims of domestic abuse, it's nearly all gender neutral. But then the reality is, if your partner punches you in the face and she goes to the doctor with a boxer's breaking her finger, the doctor will say, "Oh, I think you're abused. We'll call the police," and the police will assume she was either defending herself or the victim. Full stop.
Right.
And
So,
the reality is
yeah, go on.
the reality is we are simply not treated in the same way, which is actually illegal, because domestic abuse legislation is supposed to be protecting what they say women and girls, and they say that term is gender neutral. But the reality is that level of protection that's being offered to women and girls, which is fine because I've got daughters, but why would you do that in a way that offers not the same level of protection to their sons and their brothers, and depends on the gender and sexual orientation of the abuser? How does that make sense?
It doesn't make sense, but where is it written that it is gender neutral? Where can people find that?
For example, I was looking at a piece on the Greater Manchester Police website. I can't find it immediately, obviously. I can't screenshot it. Where the deputy chief constable was saying, "We're proud that Greater Manchester Police is forging ahead with with our campaign to end domestic abuse." and all victims should be assured that they'll be treated equally and treated fairly and all the rest of it. That's what it actually does say, all victims. But the reality is that we do not have that luxury as fathers, or even gay men or bisexual men, of going and saying, I'm being abused. And I don't, from what I can gather, it's even worse for gay women, because you're accusing a woman of abuse, and women are unofficially seen as always the victims.
Yeah, that's quite an interesting topic there. I don't know what the stats is, but I have heard that domestic abuse amongst the gay community and lesbians is through the roof. So
it is.
So what's going on in the legal system in terms of who do they protect? Because it's two genders of the same gender. What's what's going on there?
What I read, I think it was a report by a lady called Dr. Elizabeth Burke. She's a professor at the University of Cumbria, and for the last 13 years, her area of expertise has been male victims of domestic abuse. And she's done a number of academic papers over the last 10 years. And in one of her papers, she actually said that within the LGBTQ community, the highest level of domestic abuse and domestic violence is between lesbian women. Next stage.
Why is that, Dave? Do you know anything about that? Why is that?
I don't understand it. But they're saying the highest level is lesbian women. Next stage down is bisexual men and women, and at the bottom of the scale, of domestic abuse, it's gay men.
Right.
I don't understand why it is, but if you read the Duluth model, which was penned by a woman called Ellen Pence in 1980, she's written that domestic abuse within the gay community is purely a homophobic rage, which.
Homophobic rage? What do you mean?
That's all it's about within the gay community.
What do you mean homophobic rage?
Well, you think back to the 1980s, everyone was sort of being brainwashed to think that the gay community was responsible for AIDS.
I've heard that actually they were the ones that were very instrumental in tackling it.
Well, they were, but I also remember that during the mid-1980s, during the coal strike, when the gay community came out in support of the miners, the Sun newspaper said perverts had the headline "Perverts support the pits."
Right.
And so that was, if you think of the attitude towards homosexuality was back then compared to now, and the undeniable fact that before she died, the author of the Duluth model, which was all about domestic violence, she discredited her own work. She said it didn't make sense.
Why did she say that then?
Well, she said that over the 20 odd years after she'd written that model, she said that the findings now don't really match up with what she'd written in 1980.
Well, because of the culture changed so dramatically.
Well, the cultural changes generally, and it was a very, very slow change, but there were starting to emerge findings about male victims of domestic abuse not being retaliatory or women defending themselves. It was straight out domestic abuse against men. And it was very slow. It was like moving a millimeter a year, but it was starting to be some talk about it. And bear in mind, back in that time, the police and so on would not look at domestic abuse unless it was violent. There was no accommodation for controlling behaviors or financial control or anything like that. I never saw any legislation of that nature until the 2015 Serious Crimes Act, where it started to encompass non-violent abuse.
So
and then 3 years.
What would come under the categories of non-violent abuse? I know that you probably looked into.
It would be things like physical, threats, not allowing not allowing your partner to socialize, not letting you have money, or him or her have money.
Yeah.
Not letting them have money, constantly running them down, denigrating them, treating them as a thing rather than your partner, and in some cases even sexual assault. But the problem is that because we are designed the way we are as men, when it's not seen as possible for us to be sexually assaulted against or have sex against our will.
I want to just stop there for a minute. I think this is really quite interesting because you've been obviously exposed to all this stuff. Why do you think that it's harder for men to be seen as the victims in these sort of circumstances then?
Because as a general thing, we tend to be physically bigger and stronger looking than our partners. I'm about 6 inches taller than my ex. So if you were to walk in and see us in a melee, human nature being what it is, it would be assumed that I was the aggressor. It would not be. You would not sort of stop and think, was he defending himself?
Yeah, I've heard loads of stories, and 6 foot guys being completely beaten to shreds by a 5 foot or a 4'8" woman who's got the rage of a titan, and yet the when it's come to the police and the hospital and stuff, the man is as quiet as a mouse, and it takes months to find out actually the abuse is from this little tiny woman who looks like she couldn't, she wouldn't hit.
Yeah.
So
about the height and build of Ronnie Corbett.
Exactly. So so we're looking at what, a bias in society, is it? If it's known in, we're all taught to be afraid of our wives. Why? Why are we all taught to be afraid of our wives?
Well, don't forget those. We had the sort of stereotype. Nora Batty and not Last the Summer Wine, and I'll be honest, I loved Last the Summer Wine.
Yeah, I did. It ran for like 35 years or something silly like that.
I know. It was like 30 something years that show ran. I loved it. I didn't like it so much after Compo died, but I loved that.
Yeah,
I thought it fell off after that, but I loved the show. I laughed at it. I loved the relationship between Compo and Nora Batty, and I loved Howard and Marina.
Just a bit of fun, really. It was just a bit of...
It was fun. It was lovely, and it shouldn't be seen as anything but fun.
Exactly. I don't know why we have to make everything so serious. I mean, we've kind of made relationships between men and women simply a combative one. Why? What's going on?
I think what seems to be happening is that our daughters are being raised to believe that if you're in a relationship that's going south, then a false allegation is the way to get out of it, rather than just saying, you know what, this ain't working. Let's cut and shape. Just cut and run.
It's almost like there's a we're not. This is not a conversation to bash women, because women are.
No, it's not.
We celebrate women in society, and we believe that women have got loads to contribute, and they're wonderful creatures. But there just seems to be like this thing where taking responsibility for things is considered to be not the done thing in the female community. What do you think that's about?
I think the problem is that there are women who do what they do. You've got people like Ellie Williams. You've got people like Ryan Kerrison's ex-wife. Look what they did and the damage they caused. And in those instances, we're lucky because their lies got found out. But as a general thing,
I'm not sure I know about this. Could you just elaborate a little bit more on this?
Ellie Williams was a young woman from Barrow-in-Furness in Cumbria. She made a lot of false allegations against Asian men in that town. She said she'd been groomed, she'd been sexually assaulted, she'd been trafficked for as a sex toy.
This is about 2 or 3 years, maybe a bit more.
Yes, she was convicted and jailed in March.
Right, I didn't know that.
And there's a lot of debate about it at the time. And then October of last year, Ryan Kerrison's ex-wife, Ryan is from, I think, Lincolnshire or East Yorkshire. And his ex-wife had, about 3 years prior to that, she'd said he was abusive, he'd broken her laptop and all the rest of it. And then he'd had to go out. She alleged that he'd threatened her with a gun. And he'd been, if you remember, he was held on remand twice until the lies got found out. And last October, she was jailed for a couple of counts, I think, of perverting the course of justice and wasting police time.
Wow.
And so, Ryan Kerrison, he was interviewed on Look North in April. But he's sort of rebuilding his life with his children, and fair play to him. But from what I can see, he was lucky. And don't forget that the allegations against him and the ones that Ellie Williams made went through the criminal court. And so the police were sort of having to investigate everything. Whereas when a lie is told in family court, even if it's a provable lie, it's very, very, very seldom that a lot of perjury is treated in the same way.
So that leads me on to, I think that's a really good segment. We've got 4 minutes until I have to send you a new invite.
Okay.
Is that
fine.
okay? We can
yes, fine.
Continue going. So in the next 4 minutes, so tell me, what were the allegations to you, and what happened after you were accused? So
after the
molestation order placed against you, then what happened?
Yep. What happened was there was a return hearing a year ago, in 22nd of September. I did a statement in response to the non-mol. She was supposed to do a response to my response. She was given till the 21st of October. Yep.
Yeah.
She did not do her response.
Why?
Her response statement.
Why not?
Well, as I subsequently found out, she'd missed all her lawyer's appointments. She missed a CAFCAS appointment, and then the police were supposed to do their report by the 18th of November. They didn't do that until February. I put in a prohibited steps notice, which is to stop her moving the children out of school, which she'd already done. I'd found out about she'd moved the children 6 times, and I didn't want them disrupted anymore. My son is autistic. I don't like that disruption for him.
Absolutely. They definitely need to have stability. Definitely.
Yes. And he's not Rain Man autistic, but he likes everything in order, and he panics.
I've got friends, and I've also worked with autistic children, being a social worker. They need to have. They have to have a regular routine.
Yes.
And that's
and if something happens out of the blue that he's unexpected, it panics him.
Yeah.
And the bedrock of his life has been his relationship with me. We did everything together. We'd go shopping, swimming, trips, holidays, everything together.
Yeah. How old is he?
My son is he turned 7 in February.
7 years old. When was the last time you saw your son?
April. And it was just after we'd had a weekend in York, and he'd been telling me, "Daddy, can I come and live with you?" And my younger daughter had said the same thing, and I was trying to set up mediation, a proper mediator to arrange to have a discussion about that when the assault happened. That assault on me was NFA'd by the police, by the way. I
can sense that's way out there.
It's because I live for my children, and whenever I go out and I hear a child watching Peppa Pig or Coco Melon, or when I see a plane go over, because I used to watch the planes with my son, especially the Dubai plane that goes over in the evening. Whenever that goes over, it hurts.
I can totally resonate with you on that. I used to live from weekend to weekend to weekend. I used to see my son every other weekend. It's the same now. But when he was younger, he used to come around and watch Peppa Pig just like your children. And so I kind of anytime Peppa Pig or anything that he liked was on anywhere, my heart would be in my mouth. I'd be feeling all kinds of different, it's almost like going through a loss, but not a loss. It's such a confusing time.
It's like a bereavement when the deceased has a pulse.
Exactly. I've never experienced anything like it, so I can totally appreciate where you're coming from, David.
It's like, a bereavement, however much you love the deceased, it hurts deeply at the time, but life eventually starts to move on.
You have to kind of, for me, it's like that pain never stopped, but I just had to deal with it. We've only got less than a minute left. I'm gonna send out another invite, and we'll continue the meeting. Okay, David?
Yeah, sure. We'll just take about 5 minutes, and I'll jump back on.
Yeah, no David, welcome back. How you doing?
Yeah, welcome back. Yes.
So as you were saying, in terms of we were talking about the difficulty of not seeing your children.
Yes, it hurts, and I remember beginning of August, I was in Stockport, for a first aid course, and Stockport's very close to Manchester Airport, and I was out having a cigarette break, and the lunchtime plane coming in from Dubai was just roared over my head. And the Dubai plane is something I'd always gone out to look at with my son when he was taking off, because it goes right over the house. And it was the first time I'd been that close to a plane since all this kicked off. And it broke me, absolutely broke me. And then on the train going back into town at the end of the day, as you come into Piccadilly, I can actually see the hospital where 2 of my children were born. And it felt like I was in hell.
Yeah.
And my friend Rob, we've started our own group, Dad's Matter, and Dad's Matter, and he said to me, "Don't let her."
Sorry to interrupt you, but I've been helping a little bit with Matter. Yeah. So
and we're going to be
tell us a bit about Matter. Tell us a bit about that then.
Well, what we've done is one of the things we are working towards is we're doing the walk up Snowdon.
Yeah, I'm going. If I can get to the top, I'm a little bit overweight. So if I can get, I will.
Yeah, well, I'm not
You're
exactly.
You're gonna have to carry me, David. You're gonna have to carry.
I'm sure we can. We'll see what we can do about that. But it's like I'll be carrying myself. I'm not exactly fit myself, but I'll do it because this is something physical that I can do in the fight for my children. And one of the key areas about that group that we're starting is to raise awareness of the need to make non-molestation orders and the restrictions on them into a two-way street. Because as things stand now, if you've got a non-molestation order against you, you can't contact your ex, your children in any way, shape or form. But there's no restriction on them contacting you, which logically defeats the point of a non-molestation order, but they can still do it. And the number of men who've been silly enough to respond to a message and then they end up in a cell, a prison cell, because they've broken the terms of the non-mol is ridiculous.
So what's the figures? Do you have the figures about how many people are going to the prison because of that then?
I've not got the figures on it, but I spoke to somebody who had Mike on the False Accused Network. He said he was doing he'd been studying law. He spent an afternoon in the domestic abuse section of the Magistrates Court in Manchester, and the number of men it was like a supermarket queue of men going through and ending up in prison because they'd fallen for the "call me back" trick. And he said
I've never had a non-molestation placed upon me. So it walked me through this. What happens when a father calls the ex-partner? What's going on there then?
What happened? The purpose of a non-molestation order is so that if somebody is a genuine victim, they can't be subject to witness intimidation of any shape. But the trouble is that when there is an allegation made, these things are handed out like Smarties, and
just rubber stamped.
It'll just rubber stamp. Yeah, they can be applied for quickly in an emergency, which is what they're supposed to be used for. But what all too often happens is that the applicant I'll say the applicant to keep it gender neutral, takes one of these things out and then does something like contacts the respondent and says, something like, "Your child is sick, call me back," or "Come back, all is forgiven. I'll it'll be like it was before. I'll melt your eyebrows and curl your toes." And then the respondent falls for it. The phone call's made, and instead of the evening he was planning, he ends up in strange ways.
So is there any kind of comeback for that then?
No, there should be, because the point of a non-molestation order is to protect the alleged victim in case the allegations are true. It's to prevent witness intimidation, because it does happen.
Yeah,
but I'm not saying that women are not victims. Of course they are.
Yeah, I mean, we want to see that women are protected in society, and
of course
law is there to bolster that up. But what you're saying is that lots of women or a percentage of women are abusing the system.
They are, and because they are women, they're getting believed automatically.
What do you mean? What do you mean automatically?
I think it's because there is. How can I put this? Did you ever hear of the Moors murders?
What, in the 70s?
In the 60s, yes.
Or 60s?
You know, Mara Hindley and Ian Brady. So
yeah,
purely,
she died like quite recently, didn't she?
She died in 2002.
Oh,
so
right.
Here's the thing: there was about, they were accused of murdering about 5 children between like Mara and Ian. But here's the thing: hypothetically, if you saw a woman on the floor being kicked to death by a man, you'd step in to protect the woman.
Yeah, you jump
even
in,
if it's normal. But even if the man was the brother of one of the victims and the woman was Mara Hindley, you'd automatically protect Mara Hindley. If you didn't know who she was.
That's the normal instinct of society, because men are there to protect women. That's the natural instinct.
Yeah. But even if the woman on the floor being kicked turned out to be Mara Hindley, initially the instinct would be to protect the woman, even if you didn't know who she was. The fact that when they were alive, half the country would have wanted to lynch them is neither here nor there. But that, I realize it's a weird way of explaining it. But do you understand where I'm going with that?
Yeah, I think I can see the kind of what you're trying to get at there. Is that
there is an instinct to protect women.
Instinctively try to protect the woman.
Yes, and that's in us all.
Yeah.
And especially if you're a father and you've got daughters, then your instinct is to protect your daughters.
Of course.
But the problem is that has gone wild. When you, for example, ask a police officer, why is it that false allegations are not prosecuted so readily, they will say, we don't want to stop real victims coming forward. And that's the reason, my understanding when I've read the commentaries, is why family court don't prosecute perjury.
So, but if you act, hold on a minute, let me just, I need to understand this. And other people watching this might not understand it. So, you seem to be suggesting that in order for there to be for victims to come forward and say, "Look, this has happened," they're ignoring false allegations to allow that to happen. How's that just? How's that just?
It's not. It's first of all, it's not just, and secondly, it's not even logical, because I read into this on the Crown Prosecution Service website. Now, bear in mind, the Crown Prosecution Service only covers England and Wales. I've not looked at the Procurator Fiscal for Scotland. I've not looked at the Attorney General, who covers the Isle of Man and the Channel Islands. But if you look on their website and the guidelines for prosecuting false allegations, especially to do with domestic abuse, it is very, very clear that a genuine victim of domestic abuse who makes an allegation and that allegation is not is either dismissed by the police or no further action, or there's an acquittal of the accused, in that instance you cannot be charged with perjury. However,
why?
Criteria.
But why? Because perjury is a legal definition of something that's happened against the court, right?
Yes, exactly. So it is the distinction between a genuine victim making an allegation that is not charged or convicted is one thing. But for a charge of perjury, of false allegations, of perverting the course of justice to stick, there has to be a certain criteria met. One is that there has to be very, very, very clear evidence that a lie has been told and the person knew that it was a lie.
So how is that determined in a court of law then?
Well, say for the sake of argument, you say that you have to beg your partner for money, and your bank statements and your financial records show that you actually have the money given to you automatically anyway, so you wouldn't have had to beg for it. That is an example of a lie. Another example might be, how a lot of the allegations we hear about are controlling behaviors. He wouldn't let me socialize with my friends. And then you go on a Facebook page and it's plastered with images of her at parties. Do you understand what I'm saying? So
Yeah,
that's
I've got friends who are in certain situations where certain allegations are being made against them, and it's easily provable that what's being said is not true. But I don't. It also seems that the women that are making these accusations, they just don't care, because it's almost like they know that it doesn't matter if it's true or not true, or can be proven or can't be proven.
It's the mud sticks. The mud sticks, and
So that must be quite empowering for a woman to walk around this planet thinking, no, I can always get what I want, even if I have to lie.
Yes, and the tragedy is that this is the attitude that's being entrenched in our daughters. That when you're old enough to have relationships of your own, this is the way to end a relationship if it goes south, because it goes south. Relationships go south, and feelings run high. I get that, but there is a very big difference between a relationship going south with a lot of toxic rows and making an allegation that could get your ex-partner lynched.
Mm.
And we've seen this before throughout history. Very, very famously in the 1950s, a woman called Carolyn Bryant alleged that an African-American boy of 14 had been made lewd advances to her. Her husband and her brother-in-law went to the boy's house, pulled him out of his bed, took him to a secret place, and beat him to death. And even though they subsequently admitted that they'd lied, justice was never served.
Why?
The boy's name was Emmett Till, and it was that murder that sort of sparked the civil rights protests in America, and sort of brought Martin Luther King.
This was in America. This wasn't in the UK.
But there was more recently in Australia. There was an article about a woman who made an allegation against her ex having molested their daughter in 2018, and her friends got this poor man. They beat him. They made him soil himself. They put him in the trunk of a car for 21 hours, and then they cut him up while he was still alive with a chainsaw.
Wow.
Bradley Lyons was his name. And
what time period are we talking about here?
2018.
Quite recent then.
Yeah. And this is like, I think, Melbourne, sort of part of Australia.
Wow.
And between the three of them...
That's the capital city in Australia, isn't it?
Canberra's the capital of Australia.
Yeah.
But it's, it's sort of that part of Australia. And between the three of them, they got 15 years.
Is that all?
Yeah. No. And it was not a quick death. It was a murder that took place over about 24 hours.
So what you're saying there is that there is definitely a hostility towards men who have committed crimes against women and children, which is true, which is right.
Yeah.
But the evidence doesn't seem to matter.
The evidence doesn't seem to matter unless they are so stupid and they make blatant mistakes that can't be overlooked.
But this seems to be, obviously the examples that you're giving there of individuals have gone, right, we're going to do this, and we're going to, we're going to seek our own form of justice, which is ridiculous. But what we're seeing is in the Western world that this kind of attitude is definitely being reflected in the family courts and in the justice system throughout. Yeah,
throughout, and there's no need for it, because the distinction between a genuine victim making an allegation, whether or not it's leads to conviction, and somebody who tells a lie and makes a false allegation is very, very distinct. If you look through the Crown Prosecution Service guidelines, there is a very clear distinction. And on the Crown Prosecution Service website, when you look at false allegations, especially false allegations of domestic abuse, the criteria for prosecution is very, very clear. And it's the borderline between a genuine victim and a fake victim is very clearly marked. You cannot miss it.
Mm.
It's there for a reason, and it actually makes sense. And you read the guidelines, it makes sense. Was this provably false? Was it made out of malice? Did the accused get arrested? Were they ended up in remand? Were they wrongly convicted? Was there an impact on their mental health? Was there an impact on their standing in the community? And if those criteria are met, then the CPS are likely to prosecute. But if, for example, forgive me for saying this, a woman convinces her daughter to support a lie or to make a false claim against her father, then worse the child will be a bit of a caution from the police and say, well, you must never tell lies ever again, because that's a very bad thing to do. That's how the CPS guidelines work. And they're there for a reason. So when the police and the family court say, oh, we don't want to stop real victims coming forward, you've got to conclude they're just being lazy.
Yeah. This seems to be like politically motivated as well. How do you think that what's the real catalyst there? What's going on? Do you know what's going on there? Like
I've got very little definitive proof, but I was sent an email from the Ministry of Justice last March, and they said, yes, we recognize that men can be victims, and during the previous financial year we gave £168,000 in grants to Mankind to help them with their call center. But then there was last March, I think it was, there was an article in the Evening Standard saying that the government had given £330,000 in grants to Women's Aid to help women.
Wow.
And it was to help them in an emergency to relocate in a hurry if there's a problem. So that's nearly 50% more given to women's charities than to men.
You know, there's about 120 odd women's charities and organisations in the UK, Ireland, and Scotland. And there's probably about 8 to 12 for men.
Exactly. And one of the things I'm noticing is that when you look at the rhetoric on the women's charities, it tends to say that the vast majority of victims are straight women. The false allegations are unheard of, and they always cite CPS data instead of Office of National Statistics data, which would say allegations have been made rather than convictions and prosecutions. So there's a distinction. Do you understand?
Yeah.
And my theory is that this whole end violence against women and girls strategy, which is supposed to be gender neutral but isn't, it's kind of like a political jingo. There's more votes in. It seems to me there's more votes in protecting women and girls than protecting them, giving equal protection to their sons and brothers.
And I think that, part of that might be to do with the fact that women tend to float their votes. So the politicians just chase women around for their votes, whereas men are quite tribal. I've been conservative, I'm going to stay conservative. No, I'm Labour, my family's all been Labour. So they stay put wherever they are. Whereas women go, I don't like what you just said, I'm voting with this guy.
Exactly, there is that. And then, there, as you can see, there is more money being sent to women's charities than men's charities in government grants. So there's I believe there's a financial incentive. And from the point of view of the politicians, they perceive protecting women and girls as to be more of a vote winner than protecting men and boys.
That's exactly right. So therefore, the MPs they're chasing the female vote, and that's why more resources are being placed upon women's charities. I can't remember her name, but did you know that the founder for Refuge, that women's protection organization, she was an avid researcher, not like, a lot like yourself, a very kind of, she drilled down into the truth of the matter, a little bit like Sally Ann Barris as well. And she there was this I found it on YouTube. I'm gonna post it at some point. I can't remember her name. She's in advanced years. But she realized that as she was creating the refuge, there was the first or second wave of feminism that was coming up, and she was saying that they were absolutely militant, And they weren't just looking for equality in things, but they were looking for a supremacy.
Yeah.
Long story short, she described how she received constant death threats from feminist movements because she found the stats and she drilled into domestic violence and what was going on, what were the dynamics, and that the majority of domestic violence was against men, not women. And so therefore she had death threats against her for years and ended up having to leave the country because of it. The founder of Refuge.
That doesn't surprise me. So that then suggests to me that the feminists, the feminists who denied domestic abuse of men have a political and a financial agenda going, that they want to promote this myth that the vast majority of victims are women. I suspect that there is a slight majority, but that it's not as vast as they would have you believe.
I think that you're absolutely right. I think that we need to find the stats on it, but there is definitely a political, financial, and social reason for it to be so heavily slanted towards and in favor of women, when actually this is not necessarily a gender issue. This is a sociological phenomenon of domestic violence and how it affects society. We should be seeing this as a public health issue where we are supporting men and women in relationships from ground roots. So how do people conduct themselves from a young age with the opposite gender? But we're not doing that. We constantly just throw people together and say, get on with it. And when it goes wrong, we'll take everything from the men and we'll just keep supporting the women.
Exactly. Well, you made a point about, I think the point was made about child maintenance service and they're not being accountable. And yet you're getting men killing themselves because of the debt they're being forced into that's not even legitimate. Absolutely. And even though the child maintenance service, as I understand it, comes under the same department as the job centres. In a job centre, if a member of a customer or a member of the public or a member of staff even commits suicide, there's an investigation as to why that happened. Whereas the CMS, when a father like Gavin Briggs kills himself, there's no police involvement.
Arlene Sugden,
they check themselves.
Yeah. Arlene Sugden was actually questioned about this
yes.
You may have seen it online, and what they're basically saying is that they kind of wash their hands of it. They say, well, we didn't have much contact with the individual anyway. There seemed to be some other debts, and that's probably the reason why they killed themselves. The CMS completely washed their hands of any responsibility. They will not look at the correlation between, it's over 1,000 deaths per year of men and women. And actually, it's a little bit higher with women within the CMS, but they won't look at the correlation. And I think it's an absolute fallacy that they have no communication. They are constantly threatening people with litigation, removal of property, passport, etc.
Arrest.
And in March, they've had an increase in their powers to, instead of going to the court for a liability order, I can just bypass that. So we are going to be looking at an epidemic of people wanting or having had commit suicide because of this. This is a social issue that needs to be addressed.
Well, here's the thing. It is a criminal offence to drive somebody to attempt or commit suicide. If you look at the Suicide Act 1961 states that it is a criminal offence to drive somebody to attempt or commit suicide. So that is a criminal offence. That should be investigated by the police, not by the institution who is alleged to have caused that suicide in the first place.
And as Noel Wilcox says, it's like marking your own homework.
Yes, or asking a contract killer, did you kill that man?
Crazy, absolutely crazy.
How does that make sense?
It doesn't, and it just shows I'm gonna use the words of Noel Wilcox. I don't know. I'm not in a position to say it's corrupt, but there's something terribly, terribly wrong with CMS, how it sets itself up within the family dynamic, where there is a paying parent and a parent looking after. I think the fundamental problem is this: when you've got two people that are separated, why are we still treating them as though they are still together?
It doesn't make any sense. And I think from what little I've read about the CMS, the biggest anomaly is, why are they making the calculation based on your gross income and not your net income?
Well, that I can answer that straight away. That's because it provides extra revenue. That's it. This is a money making machine, isn't it?
It is.
It takes up to 25%. Was it 25 or anything up to about 45% or even more? The salaries have been overestimated by 300%.
Yes, and so because your gross income is not what you actually take home. How are you expected to pay from something you don't have?
How many fathers out there are right this moment paying for their children from gross? Put your hands up. Put a comment in the sections below. How many parents out there are paying for your children out of gross? And then pointing at the fathers within the CMS and saying how they're a deadbeat dad if they're not paying. Think about the pressures that they're under to pay for their children. It's absolutely phenomenal. It's a public health issue. It really is.
Yes, it's like COVID. And I'm not going to get into the debate about was COVID real, was masks real, was the vaccine.
Oh, if you're going to go there, David, I'm going to get my tinfoil hat.
But the one thing that I actually enjoyed about that whole COVID time was there's a Scottish comedian called Janie Godley. She used to do these voiceovers for Nicola Sturgeon's press briefings, and I laughed till I cried about those. When you're having a down moment, watch one of those, and you will wet yourself laughing. So I've got certain videos on YouTube like that when I'm feeling down, they're my go-to thing for picking me up. So and Janie Godley is one of them.
As you were saying about the COVID, what were you about to say there?
Well, what I was going to say about COVID was it was at that time, it was. I think it was where the rot set in for us, because my ex was going out to on night shifts at the bakery. She was coming home. She was falling asleep. She'd have a bath, breakfast, go to bed, and sleep. I had the children to look after, and I was also doing my university work. So, and this is within the confines of lockdown, and it was what it was, But the fact that she was going out and supporting us, and I was doing what I was doing, which ultimately led to an income, but it was where the rot started to set in.
Yeah,
for us.
So she just what you seem to be suggesting is that she had a certain expectation of you, and because she felt that you weren't meeting that, she was then abusing you and denigrating.
Yeah.
And that culminated in, right, she's had enough of this. So she was going to make a false allegation on the basis that she wanted to remain in the UK and have services provided for her as though she was a UK resident. Is that right?
Exactly. If you look at the evidence, if you could see the evidence bundles that went into for when we were fighting the non-molestation order, if you look at went through all the forgive me, if you look through all the evidence, the conclusion is inescapable. But the problem is that when we were fighting the non-molestation order, we submitted our evidence, and because she didn't play her part, it was never actually viewed. And then when in January of this year, I was in court for a prohibited steps notice hearing, which I'd issued on her.
So explain for the people who don't know.
A prohibited steps order is where you the applicant, in this case me, puts in certain things that the ex can't do. So, for example, they can't relocate, they can't change the names of the children, they can't introduce a new partner to the children. And it wasn't that I wanted to restrict her movement, it was because I said I knew that she'd been moving the children 6 times based on this myth that I was chasing around. I wasn't, but I didn't want the children being taken out of school. And so that notice remains in place. But I attended that. We then found out, believe it or not, that in the preceding months, she had not done any of her statements that she was supposed to be ordered to by the court. She'd missed a CAFCAS interview. And then
what was the CAFCAS interview for her then?
CAFCAS is the Courts and Family Advisory Service. And she'd not done that, which I'd done my CAFCAS interview. She hadn't. And then believe it or not,
why hadn't she though? It was obviously going to be advantageous for her, because then she'll be able to give her side of the story and also the voice of the children as well. So why would she miss that?
She never gave an explanation.
Right.
And so at the end of what actually happened, as bizarre as it will sound, we were waiting to go into the court. There was myself, my lawyer, my father, two of my cousins, and my ex. She came out of the lift with my eldest daughter. And in that moment, the world fell away, I swear to God, and I was dimly aware of what was going on around me, but not the world didn't exist. I was just there with my daughter. And I could hear my lawyer saying in the presence of the CAFCAS woman, saying, right, you've made some very serious allegations. I need you to go with this lady from CAFCAS and do your interview now, then we go into court. We went into court, and then the court ordered my law and asked if my lawyer would help my ex get a new lawyer, sort out her legal aid certificate, and support her to make sure she did a Scott schedule for what was going to be a finding of fact.
A fact finding.
Yeah. So my lawyer said, okay, I'll do that. She didn't bill me for it, but she said, right, we'll do this, because my lawyer actually said, your ex needs legal representation. She cannot go on without it. And so she actually presented the case to the court. My ex needs a proper lawyer. So she was, for the first 2 weeks of January, my lawyer was chasing around like a blue, whatever it is, fly, trying to make sure that my ex had a lawyer, her legal aid certificate, and did her Scott schedule, which is like another statement that you have to do for fact finding. My ex didn't do any of that. We even got a dispensation from the court for me to get hold of a blank Scott schedule, get it to her friend, and the friend pass it on. She didn't do the Scott schedule. We had a final hearing for the non-molestation order in February, and my ex didn't turn up, so the non-molestation order was dismissed. We had the finding of fact was reduced to 1 hour in March, and it was simply she was supposed to turn up and say, why didn't you do your statements, and why didn't you do your court orders, and the stuff that the court ordered you to do. She didn't turn up to that. So all the allegations that were in the non-molestation order were gone.
So why didn't she turn up to any of this? If this is so important to her, and she's obviously wanting to gain from this, she obviously wants to have the children, she wants to have services, she wants to remove herself from you. Why would she not turn up?
To be honest, I don't understand the mindset behind her. From what I know of her, I suspect what she was trying to do was build up this narrative that she's the hero, she's the peacemaker, she's actually trying to make sure that dad is not excluded from his children's lives.
Well, you're saying something really interesting there, because I think that is how family court operate. It works on the perpetrator, victim, hero dynamic.
Yes.
And then the woman or the perpetrator, whoever that is if you're dealing with false allegations, it's likely to be, not necessarily, but mostly the majority is as a woman making false allegations against a man, and he's the perpetrator, but then acts like the victim in court.
Yes. I can't prove this, but I have this feeling I get this impression, I can't say why, but I get the impression that for a man to get away with doing what our ex-wives are doing, they have to be in a position to afford the best lawyers, the best barristers, the best legal representation to get the first punch in.
I'd like to second that, because you know, in my own situation, I was accused of abusing my own child, and that my ex was acting like she was the victim, but actually she was the perpetrator. And it was proved that actually what was happening was that there was even though the judge threw out parental alienation, it was proved that she and others were abusing my son, and I'd never abused my son.
No.
But before that was actually proved, the judge said, we are looking to turn this into a criminal court hearing on the basis of the evidence. Now, when the case cracked open and it was realized actually it wasn't, I wasn't doing any of it. There was no consequence, nothing. It was somehow a criminal, potentially a criminal hearing. Potentially, it was going to turn into a criminal hearing for me, a criminal case. They were going to escalate it into a magistrate's. But then, but when they found out that actually it wasn't me, it was from her, nothing.
I've read a number of lawyer commentaries on this point, and they're saying the family court don't prosecute false allegations because they don't want to stop real victims speaking up. The only case I've ever heard of where a family court judge referred perjury to the Crown Prosecution Service or the Director of Public Prosecutions was a divorce hearing between a woman and a man, where the man's it was a dispute over property and money, and the man's statement was apparently so riddled with lies that the judge in 2015 referred to the DPP. And that was when they were talking about money and property, not when they were talking about the well-being of children. Yeah. I think the case was called Kaur versus Randwa in 2015, and it sounded like an Indian or Pakistani sounding name, but it's Kaur versus Randwa. It's in. You can Google it, and that is the only time I've ever seen an instance where a legal precedent for a family court judge to refer false allegations or perjury to the prosecutor.
So, what do you think that dynamic is accurate in your own circumstance, where you've got perpetrator who is a victim, who is the perpetrator is the victim, and the perpetrator in the legal WU is the actual victim. Is that the dynamic that you've seen in your situation?
The dynamic I've seen that I've seen, and from talking to people when we met up at Falsely Accused Day, is that the real perpetrator, if they're female, they can get away with it.
It doesn't really, yeah. We've obviously covered the fact that the legal framework that we are working within doesn't really take into consideration that a woman is guilty or not. It basically, she's just immune to prosecution. She's immune to any kind of sanctions or any within the family court. That may be different in a criminal case, but there is a dynamic, I feel, that is being played out there. And what some of the things that people discuss is that you're often dealing with a narcissist or a narcissistic tendencies. And if you're dealing with a narcissist, you are dealing with almost a triangle, where at one end of the triangle you've got the perpetrator, which is often the woman, can be the man. Narcissists can be men.
Oh yeah,
narcissists can abuse women through the court system. We
acknowledge
that, but it does seem to be predominantly women who are doing this. So we'll go with women are the ones who are making false allegations within this podcast, and so they are the perpetrators, but they are actually let's have this section just for things that you specifically want to talk about. What do you want to talk about, David?
Right. One of the things I want to talk about would like to say is that in starting Dad's Matter, we are trying to raise awareness of what's going on, and a big part of our campaign is to make this whole thing about the non-molestation orders a two-way street. The restrictions have got to be a two-way street. And I think the reason for that is not just purely about the criminal justice system. It is, I believe, it is one of the most effective ways to weed out the genuine victims, the fake victims from the real victims of domestic abuse.
Yeah.
Because realistically, when you think of what a non-molestation order is, it's a protective device designed to prevent witness intimidation where there has been domestic abuse. That's what they're for.
Mm.
So when somebody applies for a non-molestation order and then contacts their ex and says, call me back, that should be a massive, massive, massive red flag that somebody's telling porkies.
But you're indicating that actually lots of men don't know this. They're not schooled in this. They don't have the tools or the know-how or the knowledge to be able to go. This isn't a call for her to say that she wants to sort something out. She's trying to dob me in trouble.
Exactly. And when you're new to this, when you're first coming into this, you don't know. I didn't know about non-molestation. A year ago, I didn't know the first thing about non-molestation orders and the CMS and it's stuff you heard about in passing, but is it like the far side of the moon? When we're not schooled in this, we've learned our lessons because we're battle hardened. And my argument that this is, as I say, this is on the cornerstone of what we're trying to do, is raise awareness of this issue and make the police, make the courts, make the social services aware this is a red flag. And in making a separation between genuine victims and fake victims who are just playing a game, it will free up resources that are needed for genuine victims. It will ensure a just outcome. It will save resources so that the fake victims don't get the money and the housing and all the rest of it, and they're called to account. And most importantly of all, children are not separated from a loving parent, and they're not placed at the mercy of the abusive one. Yeah. How is that? So how does that not benefit society?
Well, I think that I'm wholeheartedly in agreement with you. However, we do know that the legal system and CMS and women, they all make money from this.
They do, and it's not like it needs to be a massive tweak in the law. First of all, it means that the onus is on the police and the courts and social services to obey the existing law. But there is actually a criminal offence under the 2007 Serious Crimes Act called an inchoate offence. It's like inciting a crime. So it's where if you get somebody to do something illegal in the expectation they're going to do it. So if we breach the terms of a non-molestation order and make contact, we end up in a cell.
Can you present that in a court of law? Can you present that law and say, this is what's going on? And what's the name of that law again? What's it called?
It's the 2007 Serious Crimes Act.
So the 2007 Serious Crimes Act, that you can present that and say, what? I've been arrested falsely because of this non-molestation order.
Well, I personally haven't, but then there are so many men who have fallen for it, because at the bottom of the line, is they are desperate. They will sell their soul to the devil for time with the children. And so when my ex tried to get in touch with me, what I did was I took a screenshot of the WhatsApp message. I saved the voice recordings, I saved the text messages, and I sent them all to my lawyer. And had our case gone to a fact-finding hearing, that would have been presented to the judge. But because she didn't do her part, and it was just a put up or shut up kind of a hearing, it was never seen. And so it was never even given a chance for us to present that as an argument. But if you put me in any court in this country, I will argue that point.
So how did you, just coming back to, how did you, I know I've spoken to Rob, and I've spoken to other members of the Dads Matter.
Mm.
How did you all get into? How did you get to meet each other? How did you start this movement? Then
Rob and I had seen each other's videos, and we reached out to each other, and we became friends. And I've been over to Liverpool to see him a couple of times. You know, we had a look around the Maritime Museum in Albert Dock, and you know,
he looks like to me he looks like a force to be reckoned with. But every time I've spoken to him, it's a sweet and really.
He's a good guy.
He's a thoughtful.
He's a good guy.
He's a very thoughtful, sensitive,
sensible man. Yes, he's
guy.
nobody's fool. He's nobody's fool. I mean, you wouldn't want to. I wouldn't want to fall out with him, but he's a nice guy.
Yeah, I don't think I'd like to fall out with much either.
No, but but the thing of it is, why you wouldn't want to fall out? Why would you want to fall out with anybody?
Oh, absolutely not. But what I'm saying is that obviously, you know, he's had his journey, but you know, he's been accused of all kinds of different things.
Yes,
like this guy is a guy who's he's worked extraordinarily hard to understand the predicament that he's in, and be able to, and to be able to understand the law and where he stands legally. And not just that, but to look out beyond himself to how this is affecting other men and other families within society. And that is to be commended.
It is, because and he's done his research. He like me, he's done his research, and he has, you know, he's got his argument, he's got his evidence, and like me, he's falling over him. We're falling over ourselves to say, look at the evidence. We're not asking you to do anything complicated. Just look at the evidence, because it's not complicated. It just requires you to read.
Yeah.
And if, you know, the courts and the police and the social services, they have a duty of care to the, ultimately, most crucially, to our children. That is what their function is. And if they are neglecting it for a political or financial end, they are betraying that trust.
There they are.
You know, now, for example, last year, the Family Court ordered the Chief Constable of Greater Manchester to prepare a police report for submission to the court and the lawyers by the 18th of November. That was what he was told to do. Now, yes, you could argue he would have delegated that to a subordinate, but ultimately, as the senior manager for Greater Manchester Police, that's his responsibility. That court order was not submitted until February of this year, about the 6th of February or the 2nd of February.
Wow.
It omitted a voluntary interview that I'd done in Central Park Police Station in Manchester at the end of October. It omitted all mention of that. And for some strange reason, the assertion was in there in February that the Queen was still alive.
What?
Yes.
What?
Yes. I swear to God, if you was here right now, I could show you that passage from my police report, my 3 months late police report, and it asserted that the Queen was alive.
And why would it be put in there then?
There was a passage in there that refers to Regina v. me.
Yeah.
Even by November, it was Rex, not Regina. It's not like the Queen's death was a low-key event.
No, I would say not, really.
You know, and you know, I've immense respect for the Queen. I think she did a wonderful. She was as a monarch. She lived up to every syllable of the oath she took in South Africa all those years ago, and I've nothing but respect for her. But by November and February, she was dead. It was Rex.
I would say that she is the last monarch who holds any form of candle to anything that you could even consider to be a moral person that you can look up to in the highest station.
Yes.
So she had what I mean by that is that she held fast to a faith in Christ that she lived out in her actions. She wasn't if you watched her when she was about 21, she said
in Cape Town.
She made a speech, didn't she, about more or less laying her life down for the good of the people. Where have you since heard anybody talk even remotely like that?
The one thing what I will say is that when you look at the King, he's always said, I want to take an oath to be the defender of the faiths. plural, rather
that
than
means that means he's the defender of none. By the way,
yeah. So he's a defender of the faith or the right not to have a faith.
right?
And I think
If you're the defender of the faith, you're the defender of none.
yeah, it's the I think what he's saying is
it's a misnomer. It's a
yeah,
misnomer.
is a defend what he's defending is the right to religious freedom, and fair play to the man. I think given the chance, he's gonna make a decent monarch, and I suspect that I know that constitutionally he can't get involved, but if we were to be able to sit down with him and show him evidence of what's going on, then he would be aware that there is an injustice taking place that's being levied on his people and on the children of his people, and he would want to do something. And after all, his wife, Queen Camilla, is one of the patrons of Safe Lives.
So I would actually encourage anybody watching this podcast now, because I've spoken to people who have said that they've written to Prince Charles, and he has written back and actually has made steps and moves to inquire more about what is going on. But I think it needs more people to do so. So if you're watching this, please write to Prince Charles. Send a letter to him.
King Charles.
Sorry, King Charles. Sorry, King Charles.
Yes, and don't forget that his wife, Queen Camilla, is one of the patrons of Safe Lives, and that charity is for domestic abuse victims, regardless of their age, their faith, their gender, or their orientation.
Well, I've got to say that is a hugely positive thing to hear. I didn't realise that it was gender neutral in that, because there are so many people at the top who are quite,
it's one or the other.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
and I think one of the things that I'm noticing is that the exclusively women's charities, like, with all due respect, Women's Aid, although they have a sort of a section that deals with male victims, they don't talk about that. It's almost like it's their guilty secret. But they don't acknowledge that domestic abuse crosses genders, it crosses faith, it crosses age, it crosses orientation. Whereas the men's charities, we've never pretended that straight women and mothers are not victims. We've always said men are victims, women are victims, fathers and mothers are victims, children are victims. And this is something that, like COVID, crosses every single boundary. It affects us all.
And I think that's because, my best guess is because of the financial reward.
Yes.
And also because of the ideology behind it, the feminist ideology kind of perpetuates this idea that you don't need men in society. Men are the problem. There's this kind of like bourgeoisie, those who are in power and those who are oppressed. There's that kind of dynamic going on. But I'd imagine that the reason why they're so anti the idea of having an open discussion about the fact that this is not just a gendered issue, this is a sociological phenomenon that actually is a public health issue. Once again, domestic violence is something that we as people should care about in terms of protecting men and women, and also specifically children. So the only reason why I can imagine that they are so against any kind of discussion, if you're talking about men, you're somehow ignoring the issues of women. It must be financially motivated.
I have this. I get the impression from what I'm reading and what I'm learning is that they've come up with this end violence against women and girls strategy in the same way that Trump came up with let's build a wall.
Yeah, I'm listening. I want to see the connection here.
And it's like, well, all right, so you're going to build a wall. Where's the wall? He was in power for 4 years. Where's the wall?
I thought he did build a wall.
Well, he built part of it, but I mean, it's like 2,000. The border's 2,000 miles long. How much substance? How much actual substance is there to that wall?
I mean, the wall is there, but I don't know. I don't think I think it's what, a couple of miles, something like that.
Yeah, well, 1 mile out of 2,000 is not. Isn't
it's not really a wall. It's just
no, it's not really a wall.
It's just
there's already a fence.
It's just a windbreaker for that area.
It's a it is, but the spirit behind the wall. It's like Trump and his wall I'm not trying to get into politics or criticize Trump specifically. That's not what I'm here for.
Oh,
It's
right.
you know, so but here's the ironic thing: whether you're a Trump supporter or not, what we're dealing with affects us both.
Yeah, exactly. But I think what we're neglecting to think about is that when you remove a father from a home, you remove his ability to see his own children, and then you put him on a treadmill and just say make money, make money, make money, make my money. You are abusing that person at every single level. But what we're forgetting is that as much as we are protecting women and saying, well, women need to be protected in society, which is true, when a woman acts in only in her own interests and is actively hostile towards the father, she is actively showing hostility towards her own offspring. And that's just a fact. It's just a fact.
Yeah,
if you are removing your own children's father from the home, you are directly attacking your children's identity.
Yes.
Because all markers of development for children indicate that the loss of a father within the home impacts every single developmental stage in education, social, emotional, and in every area. So
exactly,
it's not just abusive towards men, and it's not just a sociological issue that affects male and female. It directly impacts children at the most core level. And you are looking at issues that will arise in 20, 30 years' time when society is collapsing because of people having to deal with internal issues that should not be resolved because women are just hell-bent on destroying the family. Look at how many men are in prison. And the reason why they're in, and there's a statistic that says the majority of men who are in prison are there because they were in single female parent homes. Fact.
It's a good point. And first of all, I was reading a report from the National Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Children, which says good fathers are key to the development of their children.
Absolutely, fundamentally key. Not just like if the mother decides the father can be there, then it's good. Children are, the reason why you have a father and a mother is because it's ideal for the upbringing of a child. It's ideal. It's fundamental. It's fundamental in brain development. It's fundamental in emotional intelligence because you get both perspectives of what it is to be female and what it is to be male. And if you only just have one, then there's something wonky. There's something off in the picture. You have to have both.
Yes. And so, sometimes things happen and parents are separated, whether by geography or a relationship breaks down or whatever, and it happens. You deal with that. My mother and father split up before I was born, and my biological father, lives in Trinidad, and I didn't get to meet him until I was 25. But it was geography and an ocean that separated us, not a legal barrier. Now, my mother has been married to my stepfather for 34 years, nearly 35 years, and he's the father figure in my life. Before my mother and stepfather got married, I refer to them as my parents. There was my grandfather, and he was a good, decent man who served his country. He, in the 70s, he campaigned to allow women who wanted to play cricket, and not only to play cricket, but to learn the laws of cricket so they could become umpires. And that was in the 70s. He was doing that. This was the right thing to do. And cricket was his passion. But so I've got his DNA in me, and so does my mother, and so do my children. Yeah. And I take comfort from that. He was a good man.
Yeah.
But going back to so I had father figures in my life. They just, it was what it was. And, I'm not bitter about it. It's just a statement of fact. To the other point about how this disease is being perpetrated by the authorities. I've talked about the police report earlier. that was riddled with lies, and it was late, and nobody commented on it.
Mm.
Now, I'm dealing with that issue with the police myself.
Yeah.
But within that report, you can see that not only did the police screw up, but the social workers screwed up. For example, when all this kicked off, and I knew that the children must be in some kind of shelter, I contacted them and said, are they okay? Does their mother have the means to prepare proper meals for them rather than relying on takeaway?
Mm.
I got a letter back, an email back from them saying, the fact that you're showing this level of concern points to controlling behaviors. And then in the police report, the social worker had contacted the police and said, father is into computer hacking. He somehow obtained my mobile number. Father has accused us of starving the children. Father has sent police officers, men posing as police to his ex's house and posed as a social worker. And if they'd actually looked into that, by the way, those are all criminal offences.
Mm.
If the police had actually looked into that properly, they'd have realised the social worker had lied to the police. So what our exes are doing is lighting a fire, but standing behind them, there are courts, social workers, and police officers who are fanning the flames.
So it's almost like you could say that, where, historically, if whatever narrative that you want to believe, but we recognize that women are physically weaker in society, and historically have been protected by men. Men have been the ones that have been provided for women and protected women. And as society has developed, there's been more and more protection given to women in order for that women can thrive in society, and we celebrate that.
Of course we do.
We give thanks. It's almost like now the police is one arm of the female arm of strength, and then you got the family courts, which is the other arm of the women's family strength, the female strength, and then you've got the legal frameworks, which also bolster up women's ability to be able to really inflict a lot of harm upon men, because being physically strong only has so much strength. I mean, we doesn't matter how fit and strong that you are as a man, that wanes. You could go to the gym with a man that's about 25 stone. He can lift up so much and it looks big, but then after a while he's knackered. So we only have so much strength. But if you've got the brains and you can use the police, you can use the judicial system, you can use legal frameworks, you can use society to bolster up your ability to feel secure in society, then you're quite a powerful individual. And maybe that's why we're all being told that women are powerful, because society literally is geared up entirely to protect women in every sphere, in every area. But what is it ultimately bringing about? What is it? Where is it heading? What is going to be? What's the end result of all of this protection of women and women alone? What's going to be the end result of that, do you think?
Yeah, I think the end result is going to be real problems for our children. Now, my children are too young to be thinking of adult relationships. My eldest daughter is 13. But if you think about my son, he's 7. Within the next decade, he's going to be starting to look seriously at girls, assuming that's how his mind works, and I think it is. You
can tell pretty quickly, really. You can tell pretty quickly.
I can actually.
It goes something like this, David.
Yeah. I remember when we were. He was about 18 months old, 2 years old. We were in a shop, and the lady on the cash register, she wasn't particularly attractive to me, but at 2 years old, my son turned into Leslie Phillips. He was like, "Hello." He actually, without looking like him, he reminded me of Leslie Phillips in his heyday.
But oh, hello.
Exactly, and he's bless his little heart. He's had
2 years old's a bit young, David. I got to say.
Well, that's the thing about my son. people say he doesn't. He's too young to know or to understand to know what he wants. But if you give him a chance to speak his mind, he's perfectly capable of saying what he wants, what he doesn't want, what he likes, what he doesn't like. But he's been for the last year, his world has been torn apart, and they're confusing a child who's been scared out of his mind with somebody who doesn't have a mind.
Yeah, yeah.
Last
If
March,
you are provided with one narrative, and you're let's look at this a little bit closely. So your provider normally it's going to be in a situation like this. It's going to be the woman, isn't it? Because the father's out of the picture. So what's left is one parent. A child. Remember, children are dependent upon parents. They're dependent upon them for emotional, psychological, food,
financial,
shelter, everything, right? And so there's only one parent left within that for that seeable reality. And then that parent is providing a narrative. What does that child do? Fight against it?
they don't know any different.
Because even if they know that you're not an abuser, even if they know that daddy's a good daddy and they love daddy, you've got one parent who is the one who's saying, this is what I'm the one giving you food, I'm the one giving you shelter, I'm the one who is providing what I believe that you need, and also your dad is an evil, rotten scoundrel. How are they going to fight that?
Well, if I might draw the parallel here, Paul, you think back 90 years ago when Hitler was coming to power. At that time, people had served in the First World War with Jewish comrades in arms. They had friends. You went to their banks. They went to their shops. There wasn't a problem with the Jewish community, but you had Hitler standing up on a soapbox, creating a narrative, and he tricked the country into believing that the Jewish race was the source of all evil, and we ended up with the Holocaust. So if it can happen on that scale, how do you expect a 6 or 7 year old child to fight against that when all they're hearing is their mother?
You know what, right? That's exactly right. And it's the same thing that happened in China. Do you remember? It's called the mid-level attack, where they got what was his name? I can't remember his name.
Was it not Deng Xiaoping?
No, the one before him.
I forget his name.
Zedong.
Oh yeah.
Zedong. Yeah.
I think so.
So what he did is that it was called the mid-level attack. And what that is that so he went after the children. So there was this new way of thinking, this new way, it could be like now it's a woke ideology. Anything outside of the woke ideology, you're considered to be, not particularly a desirable individual. So what he got the children to dob in the parents for having views outside of this new way of thinking, right?
Yeah.
And that was the way that he was able to bring in a very authoritarian regime, subjugating an entire nation. And that's what we're seeing right now. We're seeing that unless you agree with a very kind of like, because we want to be polite to people, but unless you agree with this ideology, that ideology, there's something wrong with you. And it's not like an outward, it's not like an all-out attack, but it is an attack on your ability to have liberty and have your own mind and your own thoughts. Now that we can see that in the micro, can't we? We can see that in the family unit. We can see if you're one parent alone, giving you one perspective. That's it. You've got your whole life. You can only then see one view, because you've been brought up with this: dad's bad, mum's good. Right, now grow up into society and have a balanced view. You won't be able to do it.
Well, they won't. And here's the thing, Paul. What is the future going to hold for our sons when they grow up and are old enough to start dating?
Well,
are they going to find them? The spontaneity of dating is going to be gone, because you think back to when we were first starting out, the joy of first love and the first kiss and all the rest of it. It was wonderful, but it's turning now into something that is more complex and dangerous than signing for a mortgage.
I mean, it's unbelievable because obviously, the onus of that first step of faith to reach out to somebody that you find desirable and to ask them to go out with you. Well, that's part and parcel of growing up, isn't it? That's part of the maturing process. Can you get past your own insecurities? Can you get past your own, your own drawbacks and painful self-awareness to be able to, speak to this beautiful person in front of you and ask them to go out on a date with you? Well, why are we in a situation where we're saying that a man approaching a woman is somehow a criminal act?
Well, we're growing up into a world. When you think back to when we were first going out in the dating world, the things that you looked at in a woman, you thought, wow, she's gorgeous. But the world that we're creating for our sons and our grandsons is a world in which, instead of looking at the things, her outstanding features, you've got to imagine the government health warning across her cleavage.
Absolutely. On that note, though, we've only got a few minutes, so I would like you to promote your channel and where can people find you? What sort of things do you put on your channel?
My channel is called New Ashton Crew Member. If you put that into your search engine, that's where you're likely to find me. And what I do is I talk about things like men's rights. I acknowledge, of course, that women have their issues, but there is a distinction between how men experience domestic abuse and how women experience it. And I'm trying to look at the law, the legislation that exists, that if it was actually used, and the rules and the regulations and the laws, if they were actually used as they're written, we wouldn't be in the situation. And what I'm trying to point out is that it does not just affect our sons. How are we going to feel if we watch our daughters see their sons committing suicide because somebody has told a lie and sent them to prison for rape?
I mean, as you rightly said, we're looking at a future where a young man has approached a woman and said, "Hello, my name is whatever. Would you like to go on a date?" And then she's made an allegation against him on the basis of that one interaction, and then that young man has then committed suicide because he feels the shame and condemnation of the legal framework, which would just go after him on the basis of that allegation.
Well, that's the thing, but you don't usually just walk up to them and ask straight. Well, you might do, but it's generally.
I did when I was younger. If I was in a group of people, I might have the guts to go. I might go up there and say hello. But you meet and you say, and you meet somebody nice. You ask them out. You get to know them. Ask them out, and it goes from there. Exactly.
But then,
or you get turned down, and that's it. You move on.
Yes, but then do we want to see that when our daughters have sons of their own? Do we want to see them in the situation that we're in?
I think it's because what you're seeing is this one perspective. When you have an entire generation only being brought up by women, they can then society is only going to have one dominant perspective. The female view of what dating is, or what it is to be approached and what it is to be in danger. Even what's his name, Peterson, he said that women are high in neuroticism, so that they're always looking at the dangers of things. They're always looking at where things are going to be risky, and that's partly to do with the nature of being a female, because obviously women are the ones that are generally the ones who are childbearing and bringing up children, so they are looking at things at the risks of this and risk, whereas men maybe don't look at the risks in such the same way. Men are actually encouraged and should be encouraged to take risks because that's part of life.
It's part of life, but the thing of it is, we've got, this is the world we're building up for our children and our grandchildren, or it's being built for us. We've got no say in it, which is a tragedy. And we can't prevent this legacy from being left behind us, that our children and our grandchildren are not going to be safe. And it's not all women, because the heroes of my story have been my mother, my cousins, my family court lawyer. When I was really down, there was one night I actually collapsed on the streets of Ashton, and she phoned me. It wasn't a business call. She phoned me and said, "Are you okay?" And she did a really, really good job for me. And it's because she was a good lawyer and a nice person. So I can't condemn women. What I'm saying is that a narrative is being spread similar to the Nazi propaganda that led to the Holocaust. And that it's spreading like wildfire. And so my son,
and that is the mid-level attack. When you realize that you in society have no freedom to express yourself as you are, you are at some level being controlled.
Exactly. And it's, my lawyer, she's got children, daughters and sons. Her children are going to be growing up in that very same world. And so there's every chance that, like me, her sons, her grandchildren, are going to be in the same boat as mine.
So have you got any words of wisdom, anything that you'd like to share with anybody that's watching this on TikTok?
Yeah, the first thing I would say is that if you are the respondent to a non-molestation order, or if you're under bail conditions, do not fall for the trick of responding. And it doesn't just mean text messages and phone calls. It means things like, if you've got a social media channel, like a TikTok channel, and she tries to follow you, don't press the red button to follow back. Don't comment on her posts. It's things like that, because the Family Court Law Act that created the non-molestation order was written in 1996, before we had social media. So there's things like Instagram, Snapchat, TikTok, Facebook. Don't go near her post. Look at them, but don't touch.
Thank you.
Don't respond.
Thanks, David. Really appreciate. It's been a fantastic.
Thank you, Paul.
It's been a really interesting chat. You're a guy who really understands a lot about this. I'm really, my heart goes out to you in terms of the fact that you've not seen your children and your experience. But I think what you've gone through, what you've developed into a person who's looking not just out for your own needs, but also the needs of other men, and with also dads matter as well, which is a really worthwhile cause. Thank you. I just really appreciate that. And thank you very much for your time.
Well, thank you very much for having me on the show. And, I'm looking forward to seeing you in Wales, please God.
I can't wait.
I think that this, maybe this is his way, God's way of saying, I've given you this task. This is your cross to bear.
Amen. Praise.
Amen.
And all glory to God. And thank you for that word, David. There, I really appreciate that. We've got less than a minute now before we get cut off. So I'm going to say goodbye, David, and thank you very much.